Hi, this is Sandy Shellis, and I'm here today with you who are going to join me from Environmental Coffee House and whoever else joins me to talk about the Arctic, to talk about why it's important, and also to use this opportunity to let you know that these things that we're going to talk about are all topics of discussion that would be great around the holiday table, around the holiday discussion. Because really, when you think about the Arctic, you think about the old stories. Kids, millions of kids around the world are told where Santa Claus comes from. Well, guess what? There's not going to be a North Pole for Santa Claus to come from. It's not funny. And basically, the bottom line is this. There are new weather extremes that are made possible by the new climate, impossible in the old climate. So these weather extremes that we're seeing that are possible now all over the world were not possible before. And I have a lot of notes to discuss today that might help you understand why this is so important and why it's so important to me. It's very important to me because it's important to all of us, what's happening there. See, the Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. Why would your relatives care about that? Well, this is why. Because they should understand that in 1985, there was double the amount of ice coverage than there is now. And 2017, the sea surface temperature has risen quite a bit. Ice sea extent in 2016 to 2017 is 79%. It's young ice, baby ice, less than 4 years old. 21% is left is old ice. And that's not every single place, but that is increasingly happening. Why did I talk? I had mentioned the sea, the Chuckin Sea, which is a very important element, and in that sea, in that area, the ice is going. It is going. But all this leads to things that are going to happen to us, our families, people we know in the future. It is. So these times, 1985 and 2017, basically, but you can tell your family is that this is happening, and it's going to reshape all our climate patterns. And if there are deniers out there that don't want to talk about this, basically you could tell them, it's pollution. Instead of climate change or global warming, you can say it's pollution. Pollution is causing the Arctic to melt. And the Arctic melting is going to lead to things like extreme weather and food prices going up, climate refugees, and we're seeing it now. So those people in your family that are going to have a hard time with this, give them the tangibles. Tell them that these are things that will happen. Some scientists say 10 to 15 years, some say 25 years. Basically, the bottom line is, I've been saying basically a lot because it's pretty basic when you're talking to your family. It is. It's pretty basic, isn't it? You could also tell them in a conversation that houses are sinking as a result of permafrost melting in Greenland and in other places. Roads are breaking, and the ecostructure of our world is going to change. And do it in a way where you say, listen, I'm not trying to scare anyone. I want you to understand what I'm talking about. You say, I'm very interested in the science of pollution. because it won't turn anybody off when you talk about pollution, because everybody understands pollution. Everybody understands that pollution comes from smokestacks, back of the car, tailpipes and all that. But they don't understand that it is so serious. A lot of them don't, because they're not seeing it on TV, that it's so serious that the Arctic, being that it's warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet, is going to create problems in the future, and it's creating problems now for every one of us. That is really why I came on to talk about this. When you talk about things with your family around the holidays, they don't want to talk about catastrophic sea level rise, but it's something that gives you an opportunity to open up a dialogue. And if there is a dialogue opened up, maybe there are people you can talk to that don't understand and don't know any of this stuff. And Gloria says, she says, I find others don't care unless it happens to them. They don't have a lot of compassion for others. How do you deal with that? You deal with it by getting those members of your family, those friends of yours, you get them interested by just simply saying, come on, I have something to talk to you about. And say, listen, you may not care if it happens to you or it doesn't happen to you, or you don't think it's going to happen to you. I have important thing to talk about. I have important information, and I don't get to see you all very often. And I want to tell you what I've been learning. And that's all you can do, isn't it, Gloria? I mean, it's really all you can do, but you have to give it a try, because these are the opportunities that we have, and it matters. It matters a lot. It really does matter. And it matters because the collapse of the Arctic is going to be exponential. It is exponential. It's not linear. It's not just something that, it's going to happen. What it means is that some scientists from, let's say, the NOAA or other different institutions, they use different curves. They may come to the same conclusions, but what I think is that with the exponential collapse that's happening is that there really is a shorter doubling period, which means that we're going to see these events happen faster and faster. It is not going to take the time that we have been through in our lives watching this. It's not going to take that linear amount of time. It's happening. But we get back to the conversation. I digress. How do you think the conversation could be started like this? Talk about food prices. Say, hey, does anybody know that the food prices are rising? Has anybody noticed that? And then that's a way to get in, because a lot of people, they don't want to pay for higher prices, but they have no concept that what happens in the Arctic, what happens in our Arctic, what happens with melt, they have no concept that that is going to relate to higher food prices. So those are the kinds of things that you can say to relate to these people. And even if they don't want to believe about the extreme weather that's happened, that it has any relationship to the Arctic, talk about it anyway. Talk about California. If you're in California, you're living this. You're absolutely living this. So extreme weather and all of these things, even this, 2012 was the record minimum for the sea ice. Somebody might bring that up. And you can say, well, you know what? 2012 it may have been the minimum, but it was such a small amount that it doesn't make much of a difference, because you never know if you have somebody that's educated enough that's been reading some of the stuff online that might want to challenge you. Say, oh, isn't that mean that, gee, if 2012 was the record for the minimum, which has happened, 8 times now in our recent decades, with having the lowest amount of ice, you just tell them, because they're going to want to say to you, see, that shows that all of these carbon reduction methods are working in 2017. But you know better. We know better. We know better. And that's why these conversations are so important. I have a little issue here seeing the bottom of my, seeing all the, I'll put that. Hi. Hello, Karen. I'm just going to say hi to all of you. And do you understand why it's so important to take advantage of this holiday season? So important, even if you just say, hey, you guys, you know what permafrost is? And you know, permafrost is it's thawing slowly, but it's happening. And when you have children, if you're talking to younger people, your children may have a very different world. In fact, they will have a different world. But don't scare them. Tell them to get information. Sorry, I just got a little... Bye. Doesn't usually happen to me during live streams. So going back to this, how am I going to deal with it? I'm talking to a family of people that understand climate change, I think, a little bit. Do they talk about it? No. But you're darn right. I'm going to bring up some of these issues, and I'm going to do it just like I said. I'm going to do it just saying, hey, do you know? Do you want to talk about it? Hey, listen, what do you think of? And that's where you get your in to talk about what's happening in the Arctic. It's so important. And Brian says he has a visual. I don't know how you bring visuals to a dinner, but I'll put this up, or a family outing. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be bringing visuals and whipping out my iPad and saying, hey, look at this. Although, this is even something. You get some of your family, some of your friends, you get them to bite just a little bit. Get their email address if you don't have it, and forward them some information. I'm going to be putting up a whole bunch of links after this because I have them and I want to. I want to help you with this. So, like he says, visuals can help, but ask for their emails. Ask, absolutely. And you don't have to use the words like catastrophic or frightening words at this event, you know, the family event. But you get an in somewhere to talk about this, because it is, to me, one of the most important issues that we are facing today. Climate change, but the Arctic melting and Greenland permafrost melting. It is so important because anyone that is going to have children, which that's a whole other topic, anyone that's going to have children, those kids could, within 10 to 15 years, some scientists say, have a very dramatically different life. How do you get that across to young people that don't want to hear because they're so busy living their life and trying to get by? And if you're in the United States, it's also trying to figure out what the hell is going on politically. And that is happening. And I'll give you a little thing that I do. I'm in this group called the Deplorables. And I watch what these people say and their comments. That's how I'm trying to understand how to get across to these people that this is not a Republican or a Democrat or any kind of issue other than reality. And I'm learning because of what I'm seeing in the group. Join one of those right-wing groups if you're not in one. It is fascinating, but it's also really scary. It is. And these people, they need to be reached. And a lot of them are friends and family, our relatives. So now that I've talked about that and how to get through at your Christmas dinner or Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, any kind of get-together that you're going to have this holiday season. And I'm going to end with a little bit of something for you guys that may not be translatable to the dinner table, but I think this will help you guys understand. And it is about the, there's 5 points about Arctic sea ice declining rapidly. And the first one I'm going to tell you is the loss of ice means more heat is absorbed. We've talked about this. I've talked about this before. The albedo effect, which is the measure of how the Earth's surface reflects the sunlight. And, you could maybe even talk about that. Just say, hey, have you ever heard of the albedo effect? You know that's how the sun reflects off the Earth. And you can say, in the Arctic, there's more open water. And it is revealing itself as the ice melts. And the less sunlight is reflected, the more heat the planet absorbs. If you can remember that. I'm going to put up some notes. And so even anybody should be able to understand without saying it's from global warming or climate change or any of those buzzwords, like the 7 CDC words that are just now, they're not totally banned. They're just not going to be used to create a budget in the United States from the CDC. But that's a whole other explanation, a whole other live stream. The heat doesn't only warm the oceans. It's heat entering the oceans during the summer is later released back into the atmosphere, raising atmospheric temperatures too. And that's one important reason why the Arctic is warming faster than the rest of the planet. Melting Greenland ice sheet raises sea levels. Number 2. The loss of that reflective sea ice is part of the reason the Arctic temperature has risen 3 times faster, and even more since what I'm reading is written. As land ice melts, it adds fresh water to oceans, causing sea levels to rise. So that's what you could say too. Hey, pollution's causing the permafrost to melt. And scientists have actually seen how dirty the permafrost is. There's a conversation. Hey, scientists have been up to the Arctic and they've seen how filthy the permafrost is from what we're putting in the air. Satellite data suggests that over the last 20 years, the Greenland ice sheet has lost, and probably more than this by now, 140 billion tons of ice. So they're saying in this article, 140 billion tons of ice per year. That has raised sea levels by 7.8 millimeters, which is 12% of the total sea level rise. But that was 2013. But I thought this was a really good article to give you these 5 points. And the sea ice free oceans, like I was talking about earlier, could also increase those the melting water from Greenland's ice and in the glaciers. And surely people at your events have got to understand or have heard about the ice melting on the glaciers. If they haven't, I don't know, what are they looking at? What are they reading? Are they listening to anything? That's where you come in. Okay, Lars has the actual number because I am reading from an older article, but I really liked it. Okay, let's see what Lars says. All-time low average Arctic sea ice volume for the year 2017. Extent does not tell everything, especially since fresh water rides the surface. Santa has to live on an icebreaker or in a sub. Very good one, Lars. Thank you for coming in on that. See, I'm just trying to make this, I'm not a scientist. I'm making this a simplistic discussion because I want whoever watches this to be able to understand that a lot of where you go this year, you're going to be sitting with people that are simplistic. And if you're sitting with scientists and you have people that you're related to that know all about this, you are lucky. And then you might learn something from them. Number 3, thawing permafrost amplifies warming. So rising Arctic temperatures are thawing once frozen ground in the Arctic. Those at the permafrost melts. The scientists are concerned that the carbon dioxide and methane released from carbon-rich permafrost could cause additional warming by adding to greenhouse gases already in the atmosphere, which is another positive feedback. I don't know if you remembered that I did a live stream on what feedbacks are. You can go and revisit that one, because I do live streams for non-scientists. So, but there is a lot of uncertainty about how much carbon these frozen deposits hold and how quickly they are thawing. We've talked about it. It's quicker than we thought. So far, they say they don't have an idea of how much methane in the atmosphere can be traced to thawing permafrost, but that's probably not a discussion you're going to get into at the Christmas table. Most results from human activity with the methane and the CO2, like agriculture and landfill and smaller amounts of methane being released naturally from the wetlands. So maybe that's something you could talk about too, saying, you know, hey, greenhouse gases are very interesting. And does anybody know what they are? And if you're sitting with children, you have an opportunity to teach them, as long as their parents don't come and slap you in the face if they're, you know, deniers or they don't believe in any of this or they want to talk about it. Number 4, ocean circulations could change. Another impact of Arctic and Greenland ice melt could be that the freshwater runoff into the ocean disrupts part of a major circulation system known as the Arctic Meridional Overturning Circulation, which is AMOC, and I've talked about this before. It's easier to say AMOC. That carries warm surface water northward, giving Europe its mild climate. Climate models predict that the AMOC could slow down by an average of 25% by 2100. And guess what? I think that may be going far. If we keep saying 2100, people are going to keep saying, well, it's not my lifetime. And they don't give a shit about children and grandchildren. Most models suggest a slowdown in the AMOC could cool the northern hemisphere this century. But the effect is likely to be outweighed by greenhouse gas warming. So we have a double whammy here. Changes in the strength of AMOC can also affect sea ice melt by transporting more or less warm surface water into the region. So it's a complicated picture, and scientists have said that the rate of Arctic melting will almost certainly affect the AMOC. And the research is going on about this. Number 5, melting sea ice can influence winter weather. As temperatures rise faster in the Arctic than at lower latitudes, this changes large-scale temperature and pressure gradients, which has consequences for Northern Hemisphere winter weather. Professor Charles Green from Cornell says this: global warming has increased the loss of summer sea ice in the Arctic, which has altered atmospheric conditions in a manner that stacks the deck in favor of more severe winter outbreaks. And that's something you could discuss too, and say, hey, where you live, have you noticed the weather has been worse? And then you could talk about what happened in Texas and the hurricanes and tornadoes breaking out, or any kind of weather pattern or weather fires, whatever you want to bring with you in your arsenal of conversational pieces. And the pressure change alters atmospheric circulations, including the jet stream. This is really important. A stream of fast-flowing air in the atmosphere. It also makes the jet stream's path meander more, which allows cold Arctic air to reach further south, affecting the climate in the mid-latitudes. Now, when people say to you, oh, see, that means we're going into an ice age, or, wow, see, there's no global warming, it's getting colder, just say to them, it's the jet stream. It's not anything else. Global warming is having an effect on everything, but you tell them pollution, because pollution is what all started this, right? Yep. So one more. Melting sea ice is likely to have global consequences by unlocking new shipping routes and exposing more fossil fuel reserves. And I've talked about that. Russia wants to go through. In fact, I think they went through already without an icebreaker in one area. So, yeah, I'm making this simplistic, because you're going to be talking to people that don't want to hear this, don't have an idea about any of this happening in the Arctic, or simply just refuse. And that's why you have to sneak in with this stuff. And that's why I did this video, because to me, this is, again, I'm going to say it again, one of the most, it is to me frightening. And we lose the ice, and it is going to change everything about food production, everything about the whole world. People are going to die. Scary, sad, but it's the future. And you can always say to someone that is an older person, you can say, don't you want to know about any of this for your children and grandchildren? What are you going to tell your grandchildren, if you have any, about the future that you did nothing and you didn't want to listen? Try 10 minutes. See what happens. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. Let's see. Brian says, yeah, it's a trip. Useful near-term anthropology. Check out, climate denier sites like Climate Skeptics. How about Frawley? Frawley 1000. That's a horrible one. Don't even go there. It's awful. It's really awful. They have every climate denier video in the world on there. Ed says the permafrost releases methane, and that's worse than CO2. Oh, yeah. I don't know, what to tell you to say if it's reversible. If someone says to you at the table, in the living room, you're stuffing your face with some kind of delicious dip, and they say, can this be turned around? What are you going to say? You're going to say, if we don't do something immediately, it may not be turned around. Maybe put a little fear. Just don't ruin the dinner. You might ruin it anyway. But it is sad. Brian says we will lose the ice. Follow up and take with workarounds. Yeah, workarounds. Local food and permaculture, all the things that we're going to do when we talk in the future. Today is just how to bring this up at the Christmas dinner. You have a little information. I'm going to put some links. And of course, the holiday dinner is what I meant to say. But as Trump says, we're bringing back Christmas this year, like it ever left. So look at these links, prepare yourselves, and share this, because I'm in Facebook jail again. I shared 4 times something that was questionable to somebody, I guess. So, yeah, I know, follow up. Get the family interested. Get your friends interested. And they might be a little impressed that you know so much about the Arctic and what's happening and the permafrost. And if you bring it up in a way that is compelling and doesn't put anybody on the defensive, you might get that in. You really might get that in. So thank you for coming, and do your best. I don't know if I'll see you before the holidays. I might do another something, but I'm not sure about interviews. But we're setting up interviews with, oh my gosh, all kinds of different people. I will probably have a calendar, actually. And the website's coming along. Things are coming along. I just hope net neutrality and the way that they change the pricing scheme and the speed does not make it difficult to find us, or difficult for all of you. It's expensive already. I won't tell you how much I spend. Have a great holiday. Peace. Thank you for coming.